I spent years saving every spare dollar, thinking it was the start of my independence. $2,000 may not sound like much, but for me it was the promise of freedom, of finally having something that was mine. I never imagined my own parents would take it, just to fund a single night of fun for my golden brother. What came after wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, favoritism, and realizing how far a family will go to protect their chosen child. Growing up, I always knew there was a difference between me and my brother. He was the firstborn, the golden child, who could do no wrong. Every small achievement he made was celebrated like a national holiday. When he got a C on a test, my parents praised him for trying his best. When I came home with straight A's, the response was usually a distracted, "That's good," before they turned back to whatever he was doing. I didn't complain. I learned early on that pointing out the unfairness only backfired. If I said anything, I was accused of being jealous, bitter, or making drama. So, I kept my head down. I worked part-time jobs after school, tutoring kids in math, stocking shelves at the grocery store, mowing lawns in the summer heat. Every dollar I made went into a small savings account I opened when I was 16. That account became my lifeline. It was the one thing that felt like mine. By the time I turned 19, I had saved just over $2,000. To someone else, it might not have seemed like much, but for me it was everything. I wasn't from a wealthy family. We never had luxuries. That money represented my independence, maybe a down payment on a car, maybe my first few months of rent when I finally moved out. I had plans. More importantly, I had hope. But hope doesn't survive long in a house where favoritism is the rule. My brother, who I'll call Ethan, was always into flashy things. He wanted the latest gadgets, the most expensive sneakers, the VIP experiences. And my parents, despite constantly telling me we didn't have money for certain things, always found a way to indulge him. Still, I didn't expect them to cross the one line I thought they never would, taking what I had earned for myself. It started with a phone call one night. Ethan burst into the living room, grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Mom, Dad, Metal Storm is coming to town," he announced, waving his phone as if it was breaking news. Metal Storm was his favorite band, known for their outrageous concerts with tickets that sold out in minutes. "They just released VIP packages," he added, eyes glowing. $2,000 for front row, backstage passes, everything. I remember laughing. $2,000? For a concert? That was more than my entire savings. Who in their right mind would pay that for one night? I didn't realize, in that moment, that Ethan already had his plan and that my parents would play along. At first, it was small comments. "It would mean the world to him," Mom said. "He's worked so hard." Worked hard? I couldn't remember the last time Ethan had held down a job for more than a week. Dad chimed in with, "We'll figure something out." But I felt the shift. The way their eyes avoided mine when I walked into the room. The hushed conversations that stopped the second I entered. I should have asked questions then. I should have demanded answers. Little did I know, everything I had saved for years was already slipping through my fingers. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Saturday morning. I logged into my online banking, half out of habit, half out of excitement to see the number growing. I had just deposited a paycheck from my tutoring job, and I expected the balance to read around $2,050. Instead, the number staring back at me was $48.32. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the app glitched, maybe I typed the wrong password and got into some demo account. But the numbers didn't lie. $2,000 gone. My stomach twisted as I refreshed the page again and again, like the money might magically reappear if I looked hard enough. I called the bank immediately. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the phone twice before getting through to customer service. A calm voice on the other end read off the transaction history. There it was, a withdrawal of $2,000, processed in person at the local branch. The account holder's parents were listed as authorized signatories, since I had opened the account when I was a minor. I had never removed their names. The air went out of my lungs. My parents. I hung up without even finishing the call. The realization hit me so hard that for a second, I couldn't breathe. My parents, the people who raised me, who were supposed to protect me, had taken the only thing I had managed to build for myself. I stormed into the kitchen. They were sitting there like it was any other Saturday, Dad drinking his coffee, Mom flipping through coupons, Ethan sprawled on a chair with his phone. He was grinning. That grin told me everything before I even asked. "Where's my money?" I demanded. My voice cracked, part fury, part panic. Mom didn't even look up. Don't raise your voice. It's not becoming. Dad set down his mug, his tone calm, almost rehearsed. We used it for something important. Ethan snorted, not even trying to hide it. Important for me. It felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. My hands curled into fists. You took my savings, $2,000, for a concert ticket? Ethan waved his phone like a trophy. Not just a ticket. VIP package. Backstage passes. Once in a lifetime. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My vision blurred with anger. All the late nights tutoring kids who didn't want to learn, the long hours stocking shelves, the sweat from mowing lawns in the blazing sun. It all funneled into Ethan's bragging rights. Mom finally looked at me, her voice soft but dripping with that patronizing tone I knew too well. You'll have plenty of time to save again. This was for your brother. He deserves to have something special. I almost laughed, except it came out as a choking sound. Deserves? For what? Failing classes? Quitting jobs? Being born first? I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them feel the weight of what they had done. Instead, I just stood there, shaking so badly I could barely stay upright. Dad leaned back in his chair. It's just money. Don't be dramatic. But it wasn't just money. It was years of effort, of sacrifice, of believing I had control over at least one part of my life. And in that moment, staring at my brother's smug grin and my parents' blank faces, I realized something chilling. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. They had chosen him over me. Again. And that was just the beginning of my nightmare. The days after the money vanished felt surreal. I kept hoping it was all a misunderstanding, that maybe they would hand the cash back and admit it was just a temporary loan. But nothing like that happened. The VIP concert was all Ethan could talk about. Every meal turned into his personal countdown. 3 weeks left. 2 weeks left. He even pulled up the itinerary at dinner one night, proudly explaining how he'd get to meet the band, shake their hands, take photos. Each time he spoke, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was suspicious. There was something in the way my parents looked at him, the way their eyes lit up at his excitement. It wasn't just indulgence. It was worship. I began to notice things I had ignored before. Small details that suddenly made sense in a sickening way. When I was 16, I wanted to join a summer camp program in another state. It cost $800, and I offered to pay half from my part-time job. My parents said it was too expensive and not practical. That same year, Ethan got a new gaming console, retail price $500. At the time, I shrugged it off as coincidence. Now, looking back, it was the first red flag. Another memory, college brochures. I kept a folder of schools I dreamed of attending, many of them with solid scholarship programs. My parents always pushed back. We can't afford to send you far away. You'll have to stay local. Yet somehow, when Ethan decided he wanted a new car for his 18th birthday, they found a way. They co-signed the loan, covered his insurance, and when he wrecked the car 6 months later, they paid for repairs. It wasn't that I was blind before. I just didn't want to admit the truth. I wanted to believe they loved us equally, that I wasn't the lesser child. But the concert ticket shattered any illusions I had left. One evening, I overheard them in the kitchen. I had come home late from work and paused when I heard my name. He'll get over it, Mom was saying. He's always been so sensitive. But Ethan needs this. It'll give him confidence. Dad's voice was lower, almost weary. I just don't want him to resent us later. He already thinks we hold him back. And what about me? I wanted to scream. What about the sacrifices I made, the hours I put in, the opportunities one gave up because they said we couldn't afford them? I stood frozen in the hallway, my fists clenched, my nails digging into my palms until they left little crescents. My chest burned with a mixture of rage and grief. That should have been my first clue. This wasn't about the money. It was about the roles we were cast into before we even had a choice. Ethan, the star. Me, the shadow. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, they fell silent, eyes darting anywhere but at me. That silence told me more than any words could. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I was the expendable child. And deep down, I knew this concert was just the surface of something much darker. The breaking point came a week later. By then, I had gotten used to the background noise of Ethan bragging about his VIP passes. What I wasn't used to was the casual way my parents carried on, like nothing had happened. To them, it was settled. The money was gone. Ethan was happy. End of story. But for me, it was far from over. One afternoon, while Mom was at work and Dad had stepped out, I passed by Ethan's room. His door was cracked open, and I caught a glimpse of the bright glow from his computer screen. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the smug laugh I heard through the doorway. I pushed the door a little wider, and that's when I saw it. On his desk was a printed receipt, crisp white paper with bold black letters. My name was on it, my bank account number, the withdrawal, and right under it, the charge for the $1,999.99 VIP Metal Storm experience. I froze. My chest felt like it had caved in. There it was, undeniable proof. Not just my suspicions, not just overheard whispers. My parents had actually signed off on draining my account. And Ethan had the evidence sitting in plain sight, like it was a trophy. I picked up the paper with shaking hands. Ethan looked up, grinning. "Nice, huh?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "Best seat in the house. Backstage passes. I'm basically part of the band now." "Are you serious?" My voice cracked. "You're proud of this? You stole from me." He smirked, like it was some kind of inside joke. Correction, Mom and Dad took it. I just benefited. That smirk, that absolute lack of shame, lit something inside me I didn't know I had. My whole body was buzzing with anger. Do you even realize how many hours I worked for that money? Do you have any idea what it meant to me? Ethan shrugged. "Chill. You'll earn it back. You're good at whatever boring stuff you do. Tutoring, right? Stocking shelves? You'll be fine. This," he waved the receipt in the air, "this is once in a lifetime. And you? You wouldn't even know how to enjoy it." I wanted to hit him. For the first time in my life, I felt that raw, physical urge. My fists tightened until my nails dug into my palms. But I forced myself to stay still, because what I was holding in my hands was more powerful than any punch. Proof. I stormed out, receipt clenched in my fist. My parents were back by the time I got to the kitchen. I slammed the paper on the table. "Explain this." They didn't even flinch. Mom sighed like I was being dramatic again. "We told you, it's just money. Your brother deserves this experience. You'll understand when you're older." Dad nodded. "You'll get over it. You're tough. Ethan, he needs a boost." Something inside me broke. Not just from the theft, but from the way they looked at me. As if I was the selfish one. As if years of sacrifice meant nothing compared to a single night of fun for their favorite child. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was about erasure. I wasn't just second place. To them, I was disposable. And I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. After the receipt incident, something inside me shifted. I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't go back to pretending it was just unfair treatment. It was theft, plain and simple. And worse, it was justified to my face, like I was supposed to nod along and accept it. But the more I thought about it, the more pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just about the concert. This was a pattern. Years of favoritism had built to this exact moment, and I had been too blind, or too desperate for their approval, to recognize it. I started digging. Literally. I pulled out old files, receipts, even a shoebox where Mom kept household records. Buried under utility bills and tax documents, I found more proof of the imbalance I'd always felt but never proven. There were statements showing the payments for Ethan's driving lessons, covered by my parents. A credit card bill with his name on charges for designer clothes, paid off by them. And tucked in the back, an old letter from my school counselor, reminding them of scholarship deadlines for me. Deadlines they never even mentioned to me at the time. Each paper I found was another knife in the gut. They had invested in him, over and over, while telling me there wasn't enough to spare for my future. One night, I confronted Mom directly. She was in the kitchen, stirring sauce like it was any other day, humming to herself. My hands were shaking as I laid down the pile of documents on the counter. "What is this?" I demanded. She glanced at the papers, then at me. Her expression didn't even flicker. "Records. So what? Scholarships you never told me about. Payments for Ethan's stuff. You've been lying to me for years." Her face softened, but not in the way I hoped. It was that same patronizing tone again, like I was a little kid throwing a tantrum. "Sweetheart, Ethan needed more support. You're strong. Independent. You can handle things. He's different. Different." That word cut deeper than anything else. Dad came in halfway through, catching the tail end of the argument. He didn't even ask what it was about. He just sighed and said, "Don't start this again. It's always you playing the victim." I wanted to scream. How was I the victim when I was the one losing everything? How was I the victim when I was the one who had to fight for every scrap of attention, every dollar, every ounce of respect? I left the kitchen before I did something I'd regret. My heart was pounding, my vision blurry from anger. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the pile of documents. My whole body shook, not from fear anymore, but from clarity. This wasn't about a concert ticket. This wasn't even about the money. This was about years of being erased, minimized, treated as less. My savings were just the latest casualty in a long list of sacrifices I never agreed to make. And in that moment, staring at the evidence in my hands, I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't fight back now, I'd never matter to them at all. After finding those documents, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario in my head. Part of me wanted to pack a bag and leave without saying a word. Another part wanted to burn every bridge and make sure they all knew exactly what they'd done to me. But I didn't know which version of me was stronger, the angry one or the scared one. I thought about the years I had spent keeping quiet, swallowing my frustration, convincing myself things would change if I just worked harder or stayed patient. And where had it gotten me? $2,000 lighter, my parents brushing me off like I was disposable, and my brother bragging about how he was basically part of the band now. I kept circling back to the same question. What do I do now? If I confronted them again, I knew how it would go. Mom would talk to me like I was being dramatic. Dad would sigh, tell me I was playing the victim. Ethan would smirk. They'd all team up in silence, united in making me feel like the problem. But if I stayed silent, if I let this slide, then what? It wouldn't just be the concert. Next time it would be something bigger. Maybe my car fund. Maybe my college money. Maybe my future. I started making lists. Literally. One column, pros and cons of walking away. Another, pros and cons of fighting back. Leaving would give me peace, maybe even freedom, but I had no safety net, no apartment lined up, no car to get me to work. Fighting back would mean war under my own roof, but it would also mean finally refusing to be erased. The hardest part was the doubt. I kept hearing my parents' voices in my head. It's just money. Don't be dramatic. You'll get over it. What if they were right? What if I was blowing this out of proportion? Then I looked at the crumpled receipt still tucked in my desk drawer. My name, my account, my money, gone. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't exaggerating. I told myself I needed proof. Not just the paper, but something undeniable. Something I could use to expose the favoritism that had been destroying me for years. I started paying closer attention, writing things down. Dates, conversations. Every little moment when Ethan got what he wanted at my expense. It wasn't about revenge, at least not yet. It was about protecting myself. Because the truth was, I didn't trust them anymore. Not with my money, not with my future, not with anything that mattered. Some nights, I'd sit at my desk, staring at the growing pile of notes, my hands shaking with equal parts fear and adrenaline. I felt trapped in my own house, surrounded by people who should have been on my side but weren't. And finally, one night around 3 a.m., it hit me. I couldn't just react. I had to plan. For once, I wasn't going to play the role of the forgotten kid. I was going to be the one who set the terms. I just had to figure out how. I decided the first step was to take back control of my own money. If they had access to my account, then I needed an account that belonged to me alone. No more signatures, no more parental oversight. The next morning, I skipped class and went straight to the bank. My hands were sweating as I explained the situation to the teller, that I wanted a new account, in my name only, no authorized users. She nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. In less than an hour, I walked out with new account information, a fresh debit card, and the smallest flicker of relief I'd felt in weeks. It wasn't just about the money, it was symbolic. For once, I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. That night, I sat at the dinner table with a quiet confidence. Ethan was running his mouth about the concert again, showing off the wristband that had arrived in the mail. "This baby gets me backstage," he bragged, waving it around like it was solid gold. Mom smiled at him, Dad chuckled, and I just sat there, letting them bask in their little golden moment. I didn't say a word until the conversation died down. Then, calmly, I slid a folded piece of paper across the table, the receipt from the bank showing I had closed the old account. "What's this?" Mom asked. "My money is safe now," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. "You'll never touch it again." For the first time, They actually looked uncomfortable. Dad cleared his throat. Don't be so dramatic. But I could see the flicker in his eyes. Annoyance. Maybe even guilt. Mom shifted in her chair, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Ethan rolled his eyes. Who cares? It's not like you had anything left to steal. I didn't rise to the bait. For once, I felt like I had the upper hand. For the next few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. My parents didn't bring up the money, didn't scold me for shutting them out of the account. They tiptoed around me, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally gotten the message. I let myself believe I had won, that I had carved out a small piece of respect for myself in this house. But that illusion shattered the night Ethan came home from the concert. I was sitting in the living room when he burst through the door, louder than usual, reeking of sweat and beer. He was glowing, holding up his phone to show off selfies with the band, autographs on his shirt, the whole 9 yards. Mom clapped, Dad laughed, and Ethan dropped onto the couch next to me with a smug grin. Best night of my life, he said, shoving the phone in my face. Totally worth it. And then he added, almost as an afterthought, by the way, thanks for paying for it. Couldn't have done it without you. The room spun. My parents laughed at his joke, like it was harmless fun. But to me, it was a knife. That's when I realized my victory meant nothing to them. They still saw me as nothing more than the kid they could use and discard. I thought things couldn't get worse after Ethan rubbed the concert in my face. But a week later, I found out just how wrong I was. It started when a classmate pulled me aside after lecture. Hey, she said carefully, is it true you paid for your brother's concert ticket? I froze. What are you talking about? She pulled up her phone and showed me a post on Instagram. Ethan had uploaded a picture with the band, grinning ear to ear, captioned, "Shout out to my sibling for sponsoring my VIP dream night. Best brother ever." My stomach dropped. He hadn't just taken my money. He had bragged to the world that I had gifted it to him. The comments were full of praise. Wow, you're so lucky to have such a supportive sibling. That's real family right there. Respect to your brother for putting you first. I wanted to scream. No one knew the truth, that I hadn't given him a dime willingly. And now, to everyone watching, I looked like the devoted sibling who sacrificed $2,000 for my brother's ego. By the time I got home, the post had spread. Family friends were texting my parents about what an amazing gesture it was. My aunt even called, gushing about how proud she was of me. At dinner, Mom beamed as she read her messages out loud. Everyone says we raised such a selfless kid. Isn't that wonderful? Dad nodded, smiling at me like he had never been prouder. See, this is what family's about. Sacrifice. I sat there, my blood boiling, while Ethan shoveled food into his mouth with that smug grin plastered on his face. He had turned my anger, my pain, into his victory lap. After dinner, I cornered him in the hallway. Delete it, I snapped. He laughed in my face. Why would I? I'm getting likes, followers, attention. You think I'm stupid enough to give that up? You're making me look like I chose this, I shot back. You're lying to everyone. He shrugged. So what? People love it. And Mom and Dad love the attention. You should be thanking me. This makes you look good. That was the moment something in me cracked. He didn't just steal my savings. He stole my story. He rewrote reality to make me look like the willing martyr, the perfect backup character in his show. The worst part? My parents were in on it. They didn't just allow the lie, they basked in it. They enjoyed the praise, the compliments, the social points. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, my fists clenched. The plan I had started forming before felt flimsy now. This wasn't just about getting my money back or protecting future savings. This was about reclaiming my name, my voice. Because as long as Ethan's post lived online, I was the villain of my own life story, the fool who made him a star. And I couldn't let that stand. The lie spread faster than I ever imagined. By the end of the week, Ethan's post had racked up hundreds of likes, comments, and reposts. People I barely knew were approaching me on campus, patting me on the back, calling me the best brother ever. Each time, it felt like acid on my skin. But the real gut punch came from work. My manager pulled me aside one evening after my tutoring shift. "I heard about what you did for your brother," she said warmly. "That's incredible generosity. But I have to ask, are you sure you're managing your own finances responsibly?" I wanted the ground to swallow me. Now my reputation wasn't just being twisted at home. It was bleeding into every corner of my life. People thought I was the kind of person who threw away $2,000 on someone else's fun while scraping by myself. That night, when I got home, Ethan was sprawled on the couch, laughing at something on his phone. Mom and Dad sat beside him, glowing with pride as he read them comments out loud. See this one? Goals. This one says, "Wish I had a brother like mine." I stood in the doorway, invisible. They didn't even acknowledge me. I went upstairs, shut my door, and collapsed on the bed. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not the silent tears I'd hidden as a kid, but full, shaking sobs that left my chest aching. The money was gone. My name was being dragged through a false story I had never agreed to. My parents were complicit, maybe even proud of it. And Ethan? He was untouchable, living his golden child fantasy while I drowned in the background. I felt trapped. No matter what I did, it seemed like the narrative had already been written, and I wasn't the hero. I wasn't even the sidekick. I was the punchline. At some point, my phone buzzed. A message from a distant cousin. "Wow, you really are selfless. But don't you think you should keep something for yourself?" That broke me all over again. Even people who weren't in my daily life were buying the lie. My whole identity was being rewritten, one post at a time, and I had no way to stop it. For hours, I sat in the dark, my mind spiraling. Maybe this was just who I was meant to be. The forgotten one, the stepping stone. Maybe fighting it was useless. But then, as the night dragged on, I remembered the pile of documents hidden in my drawer. Proof of years of favoritism. Receipts, bills, letters. Hard evidence that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't exaggerating. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my chest still tight, but my mind clearer than before. If they were rewriting my story in public, then maybe it was time I rewrote theirs. The breaking point came the night my cousin called. Not texted, called. He wanted to thank me for setting such a good example for the younger kids in the family. I could hear the admiration in his voice, and it made me sick. That's when I knew I couldn't keep living in the lie Ethan had created. The next day, I gathered everything. The concert receipt with my account details, the bank statements, the old documents showing years of favoritism. I put them all in a neat folder. Then I printed screenshots of Ethan's Instagram post and the comments praising me for my so-called sacrifice. I wanted it all in one place, the truth side by side with the lies. That evening, I waited until everyone was in the living room. Mom and Dad were watching TV. Ethan was sprawled across the couch with his phone. I stood in the doorway, folder in hand, my heart pounding like a drum. "We need to talk," I said. Ethan groaned. "Not this again." I ignored him. I walked to the coffee table, dropped the folder with a loud smack, and opened it. Here's the truth. Every dollar I saved for years, gone. Not because I wanted to make my brother's dream come true, but because you— I pointed at Ethan, and you too. I turned to my parents, decided my work didn't matter. Dad's face darkened. "That's enough." "No," I cut him off. My voice was shaking, but louder than I expected. "You don't get to control this story anymore. You stole from me. You posted lies about me. And you let the world believe I was some kind of selfless hero when in reality, I was robbed by my own family." I laid the receipts out one by one, the papers covering the table. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but his grin wavered as I slid the bank statement in front of him with his concert ticket charge highlighted. Mom reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. "No more excuses. I have proof, and I'm done being the silent one." For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of my breathing. Then I pulled out my phone. And here's the part you didn't expect. I've already shared this with people outside this house. Friends, extended family. They know the truth now. The story's not yours anymore. Ethan shot up from the couch. "You wouldn't." "I already did," I said flatly. "The next time someone sees your little Instagram brag, they'll also see the receipts. They'll see the reality behind your dream night." Mom's face went pale. Dad clenched his jaw. Ethan sputtered, his phone slipping from his hand. For the first time, they looked nervous. I stood there, shaking but unbroken. "You wanted to erase me. Instead, you erased yourselves. Congratulations." Then I turned, walked out of the room, and for once, none of them stopped me. After that night, nothing in the house felt the same. The silence was heavy, stretched thin across every meal, every hallway encounter. Ethan stopped bragging overnight. His Instagram post disappeared the next morning, but the damage was already done. People had seen it, and now, people had seen my version too. The calls started trickling in. An aunt who had gushed about my sacrifice called back, this time stammering an apology. A family friend sent me a message. I had no idea. That was cruel of them. Even at work, my manager gave me a nod and said, "I'm glad you set the record straight." It was small, but it mattered. The narrative wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. At home, though, the tension only grew. Mom tried the guilt routine. "Do you realize what you've done to this family? You embarrassed us." I looked her straight in the eye for the first time and said, "You embarrassed yourselves." Dad avoided me, his silence a mix of anger and shame. Ethan tried to joke once, something about me overreacting, but the look I gave him shut him up fast. I won't pretend everything magically fixed itself. My parents didn't suddenly turn into fair people who valued me the same as my brother. But the power dynamic shifted. For once, they knew I wasn't afraid to call them out, to put receipts on the table, literally and figuratively. The money? Gone for good. There was no getting that back. But what I gained was harder to measure: boundaries. I opened my own account, started setting stricter lines about what they could and couldn't involve me in. I stopped sharing details about my earnings or savings. It felt cold at first, building walls against the people who were supposed to be my foundation. But those walls were necessary if I wanted to survive in this house until I could move out. And I did move out, a few months later. It wasn't glamorous. I rented a small room with creaky floors and thin walls, but it was mine. Every dollar that went into that rent was mine. Every piece of food in the fridge was mine. No one could take it away with a signature at the bank. Looking back, I realized the $2,000 was never just about money. It was the breaking point of a lifetime of favoritism and erasure. It was proof that my family would always choose him over me unless I forced them to see me. And that's exactly what I did. Do I still talk to them? Barely. There are polite texts on holidays, the occasional strained phone call. But I don't rely on them anymore. For money, for validation, for anything. Ethan keeps living his golden boy life, but he knows I'm not his silent sponsor anymore. Sometimes I think about that night, about slamming the folder onto the table, about finally speaking louder than their excuses. That was the night I stopped being the expendable child. It cost me $2,000 to learn that lesson. But honestly, it was worth every penny. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that family doesn't automatically mean fairness. Blood doesn't guarantee respect. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the very ones who cross the line the fastest. And when that happens, you have two choices: stay quiet and let the story be written for you, or speak up and take control of your own narrative. It took me years and a stolen $2,000 to realize that silence doesn't keep the peace. It just keeps you invisible. The moment I finally put the truth out there, everything changed. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough to remind me that I wasn't powerless. So if you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the expendable one, I get it. And I hope this story shows you that you're not alone, and that fighting back, in your own way, is worth it. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want to hear more stories like this, raw, personal, and real, stick around, subscribe, and let's keep uncovering the truths we're not supposed to say out loud.